to be the type of audience to listen to this, I try to think, of course, of a relevant angle in the storyline from Purim and what we could learn from the story of Purim and the way it would apply to our lives today. And the more time I spent thinking about it, the more I concluded that there actually is a very important relevance to the story of Purim, what we could learn from it in helping us deal with struggles within our own personal lives, family lives, and how to relate to the ongoing contemporary challenges all around us. I'd like to start with asking the question that Chazal asked, which is, where do we know Haman from? And Chazal teach us that we know about Haman from Bereshis. It says Hamin Ha'etz. And Chazal teach us that the reason Haman's name is hidden in that passage is because that tree that Adam and Chava ate from is actually more problematic the more we think about it than meets the eye. On the one hand, after eating from the tree, Hashem exiled them from Gan Eden. And yet, we say that the tree was called the tree of good and evil. And a lot of Meforshim ask an obvious question. That doesn't make any sense. The tree should have been called the tree of evil. Where's the good in eating from a tree that causes all the daughters afterwards to be exiled out of Gan Eden, and till this day we're still trying to misake the chait. And the explanation is as follows. It's not that the tree is evil. The tree is good and evil. And the way to understand it is as follows. Until Adam and Chava ate from the tree, the entire world was perceived by them as black and white. Everything made sense. And yet, when they ate from the tree, good and evil, which were merged in each fruit on that tree, was internalized by them. And once they internalized that concept, everything became gray. It was no longer clear to them what decisions were correct, which decisions were not. They no longer had the clarity that they once had as to how the world operates, what their place is in the world. And the proof is in the conversation that immediately followed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Adam, I echo, where are you? Now obviously, it can't be that Hashem is asking where he is, because of course Hashem is all-knowing. And so Hashem knew where Adam was. So why would Hashem speak that way to Adam? And Mefarshim teaches that the reason he spoke that way is because he was telling Adam a lesson for him. Not that I don't know where you are. Of course I know where you are, I'm Hashem. I'm asking you, Adam, I echo, where are you? Do you know where you stand in the world? After all, what was happening? Adam wrapped himself all of a sudden in a leaf, right? The Torah says, now he felt embarrassed. Now he felt uncomfortable. And Hashem is saying, are you kidding me? I know who you are. I created you. I echo, where are you? Where are you holding in life? And from that moment on, all of history is basically a footnote to that event. And the story of the Jewish nation and the receiving of the Torah at Har Sinai is about making a tikkun on this avera, which is we live in a world that's gray. We live in a world that's confusing. We live in a world where it's very hard to understand what is the right decision, what is right for me, what is right for my family, what is right for Klal Yisrael. And the story of Har Sinai is the story of us making a tikkun on the events that took place in Gan Eden with Adam and Chava. More specifically, when we were at Har Sinai, something interesting happened. Hashem gave the Torah Shebiksav, and that's when the Jewish people said Nasa v'Nishma. And yet, when Hashem was ready to give us the oral law, what we today know as the Talmud, at that point the Jewish people were very hesitant. To what degree? That the Torah tells us that Hashem had to hold a mountain over our heads and say, accept the Torah or you'll die here. And that's exactly what Tosfos explains in Gemara Shabbos and says, Hashem had to do that only by Torah Sheval Peh. Torah Shebiksav we accepted. And because of our hesitation and not fully embracing the Torah Sheval Peh, it was not only until Purim that finally, Kimu V'Kiblu, the Jewish people then accepted wholeheartedly the Torah Shebaal Peh. And the question is why? What is it about Torah Shebaal Peh that for us Jewish people is such a struggle? Well, if we think about it, the typical thing, right, that we see in Chinuch and the struggle in Jewish education is Gemara, right? That's one of the most hardest aspects of Jewish education. How many children unfortunately suffer from the way they're taught Torah Shebaal Peh, the way people have to break their heads over Torah Shebaal Peh. Many people will opt out and learn anything other than Gemara. Gemara is a very challenging thing, and yet the question has to be asked: why is it this way? What about it? Why is it set up that way? Why did Hashem set it up? On the one hand, He made Torah Shebeksav, something that is fixed, doesn't change. We're not allowed to change a single letter. Somebody's reading in shul and pronounces wrong, we start screaming at that person to make a correction. And yet, when it comes to Torah Shebaal Peh, it's vibrant. It has chidushim. It has lots of interpretations, explanations. And the reason is because Hashem wanted us to have two aspects to our living, to our spiritual life. There are things that are fixed and they're part of our life in a permanent way, and there are parts of our life that are meant to be vibrant and with His chadshus and with opportunity to find chidushim and find my uniqueness in Hashem's world and in His Torah. By the time of Purim, the Jewish people came to terms with that critical component of our living. And one of the things that is a big theme of Purim is masks. And I think part of the reason, the way I linked in my mind the title that the group gave, Discover Your True Self, is right, the typical theme. A lot of rabbis will talk about it when it comes to Purim time, masks. We wear masks. And on Purim we wear masks because we cover our true selves. And Esther, right, Esther Panim, the Sasser, the shorish of the word, is to be hidden. And there's certain hiding going on. Hashem doesn't reveal Himself. We don't see His name anywhere on the pages of the Megillah. And yet, somehow we find through that hiddenness enormous strength in ourselves to reconfirm our relationship with Hashem, with His Torah, especially Torah Shebaal Peh, and find that connection again and link to Him. And through that, Jewish people were able to be successful, and ultimately, right, we know the end, and Haman was killed, and his sons, and the Jewish people prevailed. But I want to talk about another idea that I think there's something even deeper for us to take out, especially in our own troubling times. In this generation, and all the different things that are happening around us, in our day-to-day contemporary issues, as Klal Yisrael. Chazal teaches the following concept, and I think it is so apropos as to what we're all finding ourselves going through in this generation. Chazal teach the following axiom: Talmud Chacham she'ein bodas nevela toiva heimenu. And Chazal teach this in the context of Moshe Rabbeinu, who Hashem said is my closest servant, who no Navi will ever be on the level of Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu. And yet, the Medrash in Vayikra says that Moshe Rabbeinu stood outside the oil moed and waited for Hashem to let him come in. It's like, imagine a person comes to visit their parents. They know you're welcome here. This is your home. We love when you come visit us. And yet, the child stood patiently outside the door, knocked and waited to be invited in. And from there, Moshe Rabbeinu waiting in oil moed without coming in until Hashem said you can come in, even though he knew he had a pass. He knew he was welcome. He waited. And Chazal said, you know what we learn from here? Talmud Chacham she'ein bo das, nevela toiva heimenu. A Talmud Chacham who doesn't have das, a nevela, a carcass, is better than him. We have to ask two crucial questions from this axiom. First of all, we see that a Talmud Chacham can exist and not have das. Very complex, almost oxymoronic concept. After all, how could somebody be a Talmud Chacham and still not have das? And yet Chazal teach us precisely that. A person can have enormous knowledge in the world of Talmud, in the sea of Talmud, and have spent many years swimming in that ocean, and know sugyas back and forth, and know misfortune, and have really sharp mind, and yet they could lack a crucial piece called das. Das, apparently, is not an automatic gift that comes with Talmud Torah. It's a separate quality the person has to be developed. That's question number one and first observation. Question number two is, why is such a horrific, intense comparison? Okay, so person learned Torah, Shkoyach, he's a Talmud Chacham, but he doesn't have das. The moment that happens, you learn all that Torah and no das, nevela Torah himena. A carcass is better than you. It's a really harsh thing to say. And from here we learn the following lesson. And I think it's crucial in our times. Hashem did a chesed. What's the chesed? If a person sees a carcass, a nevela, lying in the field, what will happen? It starts rotting, it becomes smelly, and what happens eventually, right? It's so obvious to my senses, my sense of smell, my sense of taste, that if I saw a carcass and I was anywhere near it, I would pick up on it right away, and that's Hashem's chesed of saying, stay away. That's a carcass, stay away from it, it's not for you. Now let's compare it to a Talmud Chacham. What happens? You could talk to a person, they could speak, they could talk the game, they can speak a certain way, they could cite sugyas, they could be very presentable, they could say certain things, and underneath, it's empty. There's no das. But we can't perceive it. We can't smell it, we can't touch it, we can't taste it. And so Chazal say, Jewish people, you have to be careful. There'll be people out there who will learn Torah and they will become Talmidei Chachamim, and they will be very knowledgeable, and yet they will not have das. They will not have seichel, that additional component that distinguishes people who are able to apply properly the oral law, Talmud Chacham, the Talmud, everything they've learned through that rigorous debate and conversation that Talmud expects. They could learn all that and not develop the critical piece called das. And yet, it will be very hard for you to see it, because there's no reach, there's no perception, there's nothing for you to help you. And that's why nevela is better than him, because at least by nevela you could tell. But when it comes to Talmud Chacham, it could be very dangerous, it could be very deceptive. And that's the nature of oral law. Torah Shebiksav is fixed, there's no surprises, but oral law is vibrant, is active, there's chidushim, there's new halachas, it has application to the changing times. And the more I think about the struggles of this generation and the different things that we're all facing, in a certain way, the last few months have been such a trial and such a test for those of us who have chosen to be brave and be proactive and try to use our seichel and try to make sense of the world. And yet, I find many people who feel that they have to wear a mask. For them, it's Purim every day. And it's not a happy Purim. It's a life of masks. I can't be myself. I can't share myself. I can't talk about things that once seemed were so easy to discuss. Now, all we hear about is separation and isolation. And people live with masks. And people feel like they have to carry themselves as if they're with masks. And it's so sad that we live in a world today that has become that. You know, throughout history, Jewish people were always tested, or most of the time were tested from external forces. We have the Crusades, medieval ages, we had pogroms, we had the Holocaust. The enemy was always without, external force attacking. And yet, we find ourselves now in a place where it seems like there's very little external attack. And we do live in freedom. And now where does it come from? It's internal. It's now coming from the inside. And the Jewish people are divided. And there is such an immense tension from within that splinters, divides, isolates, and causes for Jewish people to lose a sense of being a nation. And to add into all of that, we now find it that so many people who we look up to and who we expected to be leaders and to have das, do things and say things that make no sense to us, very hard to wrap our minds around, and very hard to understand where's the das in these decisions. Where was the sensitivity and understanding and the broad thinking that is necessary to ensure survival of marriages, of families, and all the struggle that people go through now. This is our opportunity to realize that the only place we could turn to our home is the Torah, and not specifically in Purim is the time to turn to Torah Shabbat Peh, and recognize that it is a dynamic journey. It is a journey of lots of obstacles, because in those obstacles is where our struggling souls encounter and touch emes. And when that happens, there's lots of fireworks and there's lots of tension. Because that is not something that Satan is happy with. That's not something that Malik is going to be happy with. And therefore, when we are so strong in chesed, and so many people are learning and spending time in koilim and yeshivas, I think we live in a time when the Malik is saying there's only one left entry point into Klal Yisrael, and that's from within. From outside, it just doesn't work. All the attacks Jews have withstood and other rabbah have only grown and strengthened and revived themselves. Then we have to find a new approach. And I think the approach of today is, let's attack from inside. Let's create splinters and divisions in Klal Yisrael. And it's happening on such a wide scale, and it's so sad to watch. And this is our time that even in those hidden places where we are suffering alone and struggling, like I hear from so many people these days, it's very important to recognize that maybe to the world I have to wear a mask. And maybe when I walk out of my house, I have to wear a certain mask. And maybe I even live with a spouse that I have to wear a certain mask. But there is a place where I don't have to wear a mask. And that's in my private world between me and Hashem, and me and the Torah. And in that place, all masks can come off. And I can engage in an honest search and journey to find emes, to daven for emes, and to bring it to my life and to let it guide me. Gemara Shabbos tells us that the words emes and sheker have very central meanings as to the way the words, the etymology of the word itself. The word emes is aleph, mem, and taf. First letter, middle letter, and the last letter of the aleph base. Sheker is shin kuf reish, three letters that are next to each other in the aleph base. Chazal tell us, what is that supposed to teach us? Emes is broad. Emes thinks wide. Emes does not think in all or nothing or absolutes. Emes tolerates room for alternative opinions, for disagreements, because emes is broad. What is sheker? Sheker is a tunnel vision. I only see one way. Either I'm right or I'm wrong. Or either you're right or you're wrong. And there's very little room to accept an alternative opinion, to accept possibility that something could be not exactly what it seems here, or a small change of circumstances could mean something else. And we live in the world of sheker. And that sheker is a result of what happened with Adam and Chava, and that Hashem gave us the Torah to fight through that sheker and to bring emes into the world. And while we struggle at that time to go all the way and accept Torah Shabbat Peh on Purim, we finally said, we're putting on the masks to the world around us, but we are going to bring light to the world that ultimately matters, and that's our inner world of our neshama. I hope that this video gives people chizuk, as it gives me chizuk, and I hope that we all continue to recognize that there are many people around us who love, care, and want to share this journey together. And while there are many to whom we must wear masks, there are many to whom we can take off and connect to each other and be close and know that we're not alone.